Welcome everybody. Happy Friday and welcome to another focus group session. Today I'm going to be talking about Revit Keyplan and shadow studies creation. Come on. All right. How we do keyplans in Revit. So when you look up your Google search and say create keyplans in Revit, this is the first method that you're going to see. So what they recommend in Autodesk website is basically in the title block, you basically put in a picture of your key plan. This is good, but there's some drawbacks to that. I'll explain to it later on. The second method that I've used would be to create a key plan using a legend. So virtually what you do is that you take a floor plan, you sketch up the area where your key plan is supposed to be, and then you just basically group it and copy it and paste it into the key plan. And what happens is that you can change the scale in your key plan and then you just dump it into your title block. The third method I'm going to be talking about today, this is going to be the best method of all the key plans, is to use what's known as the area plans. So what you could do with this, you could just draw up anything in your area plans, and what happens is that it automatically updates. So basically this is kind of like advantages and disadvantages. I won't read through it, but I mentioned here 3 steps. The first one's going to be good, the second one's better, the third one is going to be the best. Okay. I have handouts. After this presentation, I'll probably send out everybody a handout. All right. I'm not sure if you guys use to do shadow studies in Revit. I'm not sure in Seattle, do you guys do it a lot? In Vancouver, my past projects, we do it quite a bit. So what we do is I'm going to show you guys how to set it up so that you guys can do it within Revit and you don't have to use, let's say, SketchUp to do your shadow study. Okay, let's move on to the demo. So I'm just going to use Revit 2017. So the first setup I'm going to do is that how you create a key plan using the title block method. So this method was, as I mentioned before, the first method. When you look it up, how to create key plan, everybody mentioned you should just put it inside your title block. Unfortunately, with this method, I'm just going to open up a new, or actually just open up an existing project. Let's use the bellwether since I'm familiar with that. The first method, there is some issues if you put your key, basically the key plan inside your title block. The first one is that whenever your plan changes, it's not going to update. You have to manually recreate that little key plan. Second of all is that if your plan is very complicated, the minute that you draw really minor like lines, etc., it's very, very difficult to fit your key plan. I'll demonstrate that when I open up that project. Yeah, sorry guys, this takes a little bit while. The project's in Seattle, unfortunately. Come on, project. Yeah, if it takes too long, I'm just going to open up my local project. Let's take a look. Yeah, sorry, I'm just, yeah, go ahead, just sit down. Yep. Yeah, the unfortunately Revit, it's very slow. I'm running on wireless, that's why I shouldn't be opening up projects anyways. Okay, so I'm just going to open up like a sample projects that I've used quite a bit. Sure, go ahead. Yeah, this is also recorded by the way, so if you have to get your food and stuff like that. Okay, so that project is open. Alright, so what you're going to do, most cases what people would tell you to do is go to a title block. Okay, let's assume that this is your plan. the first thing you would do in the plan, let's say I'm going to go into just a key plan. Okay, the first thing you're doing here is that you just draw in, let's say, an outline of your building. So the first thing I would use is masking region or fill region, doesn't matter what it is. So what you're going to do is that you're just basically going to pick the corner of your building, right, just using a masking region. I'm just showing you the first method how to create a key plan. So the first thing I would do is you go to a plan, you just draw where you want it. All right, let's assume that this is your building. Now this method is it's pretty you kind of have to manually sketch in your building. Okay, it's not automatic, so you kind of have to just sketch it in, make sure everything's good. I'm just going to end it right there. Just keep it simple.
So what's the topic discussion today?
Today I'm just going to talk about how to create key plans inside Revit.
Okay. I'll join you guys.
Okay, sure. So what I did here is that I just basically just draw in a very simple, just the area of the key plan. And once you get everything in it, let's assume that this is what you have. Oh, show me where it is. There we go, that's the mistake. Oh yeah, I forgot about that. There we go. Let's assume that this is the area that you want. Now the next thing you want to do is that you want to put this key plan inside your drawing, let's say your title block. So let's assume that I'm going to open up one of my title block, a site plan. How would you do it? Okay, let's assume that this is your site plan. You want to put in like a key plan in here. The first thing you want to do is that, just ignore that. You go in here, you want to put in your key plan. Now, you could do this. I'll go back to my plan. Oh, where's my plan? It closes my plan. Okay, so let's say this is your key plan. Now, the unfortunate thing about Revit is that once you draw in this stuff, when you want to copy this and paste it to your title block, let's say I'm going to paste it here, it tells you that no, I can't do it. Okay, that's the disadvantage of using this method, because you cannot copy in anything inside. So the next method you have to do in order to get it to work is you kind of have to go into this particular view, select that object, isolate it. Okay, let's say this is your key plan. And then you have to use what's known as the export method, which is the DWG. I know some people say I'm going to hate this, but at the same time, this is the only way to get it to Revit to kind of recognize that. Okay, the next thing, I'm just going to dump it into via works and say this is the key plan. Okay, make sure you choose the second one. If you say turn off, means that all the plans going to be turned off, turn on. So I'll just say leave this so that you only isolate that key plan. Next you do, I should close this. Do not save. Relinquished. Next thing you would do inside the key plan, let's say I'm going to go back. Thank you, Emma. Okay, so once you're in here, what you do is that you're going to go insert, import CAD. Okay, select that, current view. I would normally select black and white. Okay, visible, or into view. Just say yes. Now you notice that it's going to be very, very huge. Okay, the nicest thing about CAD import is that if you draw this in as lines, I'm going to show you later on, like once I scale this drawing, it's still going to work, but when you're trying to draw in that manual line, like for example like this, it's going to fail if you do that. So let's say I'm going to scale. Sure, just use graphics. So let's say from here to there, I want to make it, let's say 1 inches. Go super small. Okay, let's assume that I'm gonna basically put it here. Okay, so that's your key map. Now, if you want to draw, you can just go in here and say pick my line, but unfortunately, it just doesn't like to pick it. So you can just draw it in, overlay. If you hate CAD imports, now you see that it will fail once you hit the line hits really, really small. This is why this sort of method I just do not recommend people doing, because of this edges, right? If gets so small, if the line gets so small, you can't really draw anything. Okay, so you could still do it if the building is very simple. You have like square box, right, for instance. But once you get into this where you have a lot of jagged lines, this is where this will start to fail. Okay, now the other thing that a lot of people don't look at is that imagine you have 2 or 3 different buildings. Like let's say you have a tower where you have different floor plans from different levels. This means that this method will also fail, which means you kind of have to create different title blocks and then turn off certain modes, right, just to get that level. So it becomes a really tedious task just to get all that key plan into this title block. So yes, you can use it if the buildings is simple, but I do not recommend it if you're going to like large project. This method, just don't do it. Okay, my next method that I'm going to show you guys is okay, let's assume that you have this key plan. Okay, the first thing I would do, if let's assume that this is your key plan, you already have this. The first thing I would do is just duplicate this. Okay, you would duplicate it so that you get the reference of this particular building. So let's say this is your outline of your building. I would call this key plan reference level 1. They give it a name so that people understand what that is. The next thing you do with this key plan is that you would group this. Okay, let's call this level 1 key plan. Okay, next thing you do is that you copy this outline, you go to legend, new legend. I'm just going to call key plan level 1. Okay, you can give it like 1 to 100. Okay, give it as big as you want. Okay, and now what you can do is that paste from clipboard, just paste it anywhere you want, and what you have is that you have this key plan. Now the benefit of this is that once you have this thing in there, you can always go back and modify it inside your let's say key plan here. So assume that this building is changing. I'm gonna make it, let's say, assume that you have, I'm going to make the surface transparency 100%. Okay, and now let's assume that the building outline changes. You want to change this, then the key plan also will change. Okay, it's still better than the first method, but unfortunately this is very tedious. Sometimes you kind of have to go in there and modify that line, right? Sometimes people don't change that, and then when you close that, that key plan becomes updated automatically. So you need one reference plan, okay, with all your detail lines and everything, and just group them together. Once you group it, then what you do is that you copy this and paste into the legend. Now, once you have that, the legend becomes like becomes a part of that, and then you can just put it into your plan. So let's assume that I want level 1. I want to put that in. Then I'll just go key plan. Let's say key plan. Where's my key plan? There you go. Key plan level 1. I just dump it here and just put it there. Okay? So that's how you do it for this method. Okay? The third method I'm going to show you guys, it's way better than the other one. Okay? You guys should be getting into setting up your area plans, because the area plans could be very, very powerful. So what I'm going to do is let's assume that this is your area plan. Okay? You already created. So the first thing I would do is that I'm just going to duplicate this. Next thing I'm going to call it is just say key plan level 1. I should say this is area. The reason why is that the naming has to be the same, or else well, if you have the same name as the other one, this Revit would just say no, you have to change a different name. The first thing I would do here is change this normal to do not display, so you only get this. Next thing you go in is you go to annotation, turn off the reference plane, turn off everything that is related to your section, elevation, let's say grids as well. Okay, that looks good. Reference plane I forgot to turn off. Okay, so what you have is that you theoretically have a building outline. The next thing you do here is that for the model side, you go in Site, turn off that property line, and for areas, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to turn this off so that you only get color fill. And then for the lines, this is where you're going to configure it, the area boundaries, and make it thick. So let's say assume that it's going to be 7, color is going to be black, and finally your solid line. Okay, there we go. That's what it looks like for key plans. So the nicest thing about this versus the other method is that here I could also do the same thing. Okay, that looks like that. The benefit of this is that you can actually add color scheme. So let's assume that I want to go gross building. Okay, if you want different methods, let's say I want to duplicate this. Okay, if I want to show something else, I could say, okay, for this particular one, I want to show unit this, and then it becomes a different color scheme. Okay, so this is how I would approach this, and then also you can actually annotate this. Okay, so you're relying on information. Let's say assuming that, okay, there's no tag for this, so you can go in here and just say parking. Okay, and then you can say this is like S1, S2, blah blah blah. So when you have this method, this becomes very, very powerful, right? You can change to different kind of scenario how you want to do it. Now, the only caveats with this is that if you have to put this in every level, you have to make sure you duplicate this as dependent so that you can say, okay, this one I want to go to a 301, for instance, right, for key plans, etc. So you kind of have to create for every single view, but this is much more manageable and it's more live update because every time you change the line, your area gets updated, your schedule gets updated, and your color scheme also gets updated. Everything gets updated. So this is a much better solution. I'm surprised that a lot of Revit guys out there don't mention this method because I truly recommend this method for creating your key plans.
Hey, Simon.
Yes.
Can you talk a little bit about what you need to do? So for a residential project,
yes,
where we have a bunch of unit types,
yes,
what needs to be done in terms of the color schemes?
Oh, I see.
In order to make all that work, because I believe, if I saw correctly,
yes,
that you need to make a unique one for every unit.
That's correct. Yes, that's correct. So what is that, Charles?
That's Brian.
Okay. So what I did here is that you notice there is a key plan here. Okay, gross building key plans. In here, what I did is that I did multiple version of this, right? And then this one just shows you, okay, this is all the units. So if you want to get, like, let's say different type of building to highlight different colors, the first thing you want to do is that you just say duplicate. I just duplicated. Next thing you want to do is that you have to make sure that you mention what units you want to change. Let's say this one I want unit, A1 or something. The next thing you do here is that since this is all pre-planned, I should turn off the key plan all. Okay, set into none. Okay, since this is all pre-planned, so all you have to do is just click on this, and this is where I change the different colors to different things. So let's say this one's A1, I hit apply, and only that A1 is applied. Okay, so this one is for every unique level. So what I did is that I took this 3 levels, okay, that I've done before, right? This is kind of like your master, right? And then what I did is that I just duplicate them and then make that into a key plan. Okay, so each one, if you have, like, let's say A1, A1, and A1, so you kind of have to group them together based on what kind of units you have, and then you say this is level 3, this is level 4, level 7, etc., etc. So I'm just basically taking it from here, duplicate it. Okay, always duplicate. Now, if you want to use the share common one, let's say for example, like what I did here, then what you have to do is just say, okay, I want this to be used for common. Then you just say duplicate as dependent, and just say, okay, this one I'm going to go to A1, for instance. And then what you do here is that inside your plan, let's say I'm going to close this out. Okay, let's assume that I'm going to use one of the plans. Well, let's go through sheet. Let's go to one of the sheet. Let's say I'm name. So let's assume that I'm going to put a key plan here. So this is what I tend to do. So let's assume that this is A1 right here. I'm just going to use this one. Now, if you want to show, let's say this is the area that I want to show, what you could do a couple ways. You could use the detail line, create like really extra thick line. So what I typically like to do here is that I would create my own line style, call it like, red line, red heavy line, and then make it like super thick, red. And then in here, since you have this key map, all you have to do is just draw a detail line and say red thick line, and indicate the area where your map is supposed to be. Okay, that's the simple thing. I mean, once you have the key map, you don't have to do like, oh, where's that version? All you have to do is just highlight that area and call it a day. Okay, so that's kind of like the technique. You can use the annotation, like you could use the annotate and use the symbol, right? If someone create like a hatch pattern and stuff like that, you can do that for symbols. Let's see if I have it in here. Probably not in this particular one, but you can create a family called symbols, and then you can just say highlight areas where you want it, and then you just paste it on here, and it just indicates which area it's supposed to be. So it's a quick way. This is how I would approach the key map. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. And I guess what I would add is that given if using this approach, how important it is to be systematic and fastidious in the way that you set up these area plans.
Yes.
And their related color schemes, so that it's understandable. Because there's a lot of them, right? There's like for every unit type on every level.
Yes.
There's a separate key plan.
Yes.
And a separate color scheme. So if it's not done cleanly, it could be very, very confusing for someone.
Yeah, it's confusing. So what I typically like to do, tell people, like when you create a color scheme, first you create one with just, gross building or whatever unit plan that shows everything. Like for one, I just took one, make it all the same color. Now the benefit of this is that you can also make it into not solid fill, you can also put in like diagonal as well. So you can also do that. So let's assume that you want all the non-calculated area to be a different hatch pattern. You can do the same thing. So here I just make it all solid fill just to keep it easy. Okay, solid fill. Oops, that's masonry. Solid. Here we go. And then if you want like your amenities or whatever, here I just mentioned it's all unit types, but you can change it to different categories too. Like if you want to say, oh, areas, you want certain one to be bigger or smaller and stuff like that, you can do the same thing. So it's pretty, like if you want to create one, here, let me duplicate one and call this area, okay? And you can change this to area type, and it'll tell you what kind of area is supposed to be, okay? But for this, I just say, nah, like this is counterintuitive. So just pick the one. You can pick name as well. Name also makes sense. You can create like different variations of it if you want to say market units versus whatever. This schemes has quite a bit of stuff. You can just manipulate like crazy. So this is why area plan becomes very powerful as a key plan, because you can have variations of stuff.
So that's that little drop down under color that you
yes.
had pulled at. So that I think is another important point to make, which is being very systematic here about what you are using to define, say, these area plans and these color schemes versus something else. So often we do leasable area plans,
right?
And those might not be distinguishing like type A1, A2, or it might be talking about like 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom studio.
That's correct.
And so making sure that you're using the right parameter in the right place.
That's correct.
And being really systematic there as well.
Yeah.
As you can tell, I'm a big fan of systems.
Yeah. I mean, I find this to be very, very intriguing, because not a lot of people talk about this. I find it, you know what, if area plans has its usefulness, it can be generating quite a bit of stuff. You can also, like, the nicest thing about using area plan is that you can also turn on, let's say, if you want section and stuff like that, you want to show where the building section, you can do the same thing. You can just turn on the building section if you want and just show exactly where the building section. But in certain cases, if the building section is too, let's say, big and stuff like that, I always use this method. Where is it? View reference. Okay. In here you have, section. in this one I'm not showing up. Let's take a look. Is it showing up? Okay, because you can use what I typically do is that I don't use elevation. I just use the view reference. Oh, there we go. Okay, you can customize this view section and say, okay, I want this to be elevation or a section, and you can say, okay, this is what section I want to say that one. Okay, so you can customize this. This is basically if you're showing elevations and you want to say section, where is this located using this key plan. Use the view and then use that view reference. Okay?
No, is that view reference will have to correlate with the actual
section
that you have on
That's
the
correct,
floor
yes.
plan?
Yes. Yeah, the benefit of this is that you can actually copy this and paste it on the other view. So there's just a annotation, but it has intelligent as well, so you can actually reference it to another location. So I like to use this quite a bit.
Oh, hey Simon, we lost you for about 2 minutes.
Oh, 2 minutes? Okay, sorry. Okay, so what I typically do is that, okay, if you wanted to create like a, let's say a section plan, right? Like a section where you want to show where the section is. So what I use is that I would use the view reference, okay? You can pick, let's say I want to do elevation, for example, like let's say east elevation. And then what you can do is that here, you can just change this elevation to, let's say north elevation. And what happened is that the nicest thing about this is that you can customize any tags you want, right? It doesn't have to be this. It could be like very simplistic so that your legends are very simple, right? Because normally this tag, it looks super big, but you can customize it using what I call it the view reference. It will just basically give you a very simplistic kind of annotations. So I've done it before with a section. The nicest thing about this is that you can copy this. Let's say I want to copy that and paste it on level, let's say this particular level, and I could just say paste current view, and it's there. Okay? Makes it a lot easier, right? Rather than, you go in there and just manipulate this. So, all right, any question before I move on to the, the shadow study? So you guys use shadow studies a lot in Vancouver or not really?
Some cases, yes.
Okay.
Depending on the project.
Okay, do you use like a lot of like SketchUp? Is that what you guys normally used, or?
Well, I think SketchUp would be for, like, say, usually in the schematic design.
Right.
But I think for, say, development permit, we usually up to Revit stage.
Okay.
With the projects that the city may want to see how the view and shadow studies.
All right, sure. Okay. So I'm going to close this out. I'm not going to save this. So this is like a perfect demonstration how, Keyplan, how I use it in this particular project. Yeah, so hopefully the user understand how I set it up. Okay, the next one I'm going to talk about is shadow study. So the shadow study is, I use Revit quite a bit just to do shadow study, just because I don't want to use another software to do it. And then also whenever the model updates, it updates everything. So I'm just going to use this as kind of like a sample, because I already have a shadow study already created in this view, but I just want to get people understanding like how I would set it up for shadow study inside Revit. This is something that I don't think a lot of people talk about shadow study because shadow study is kind of like one of those, do I get it right or do I not get it right? So
I'm just wondering, I have not used
Okay.
Revit for shadow studies.
Okay.
I'm wondering how you locate the
Geographic data?
Yeah,
Okay,
data.
sure. I'm going to show you that. So I'm going to use level 1 as an example. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to duplicate. Okay. You can call this, shadow study. I usually go by, time and date. So let's assume that this is July 4th, right? I'm going to make it American birthday, and then I'm just going to say 2020. Okay, let's assume that this project is going to be done in 2020. Okay, the first thing I would do in here is that once I create this, I go VV. I would turn off all the annotations for now. I would turn off anything that is not useful. All right, assuming that you have a work set, you have interiors, so I have parking, I have demising wall, and I have a suite inside, so I'll just say turn them off if you have. If you organize your stuff, it looks fine, okay? This is what it's going to look like. And the next thing I'm going to do is any filters, I just say turn them off. And the next thing I would do is that I would turn on my topo. Okay, that's very important. I would turn off any links that is not really useful for now. I'll just say okay, okay. All right, that's what it looks like. Now, it doesn't look like there's a roof. But there's a trick you can actually manipulate this. So what you're gonna do is that you're gonna go into the view range, okay? This is the number that I usually put in, okay? So let's assume that your building is 50 feet high. I usually just give it like a very high number so people don't see it, right? So let's say this is 200 feet. Let's make it, let's go 1,000 feet, just in case, right? Later on, I'm gonna demonstrate what's the difference between one of the shadow, how it impacts your building. All right, so once you do that, you notice that, okay, looks like it's what you want, okay, shadow. And the next thing I would do is that select all of this and turn off the patterns, okay? Because when you do shadow study, what tends to happen is that the scale is going to be big. Like it's going to be like 1 to 100 or 1 to 250, 1,000 to 2,500. Okay, it's going to look like this, right? So what happened is that when you're projecting shadow, anything details is going to look like a blob. So I try to cut down as much as I can. And the other thing I want to turn off is this landscape drawings. Okay, so let's assume that that site landscape. So here I'm just going to go to filter. Create a filter, see what that object is, and then you just basically say, okay, this is a landscape. I don't need to show that. Next step is that, okay, what is this? Okay, this looks like a planting. So you can go in here, just turn off the planting because you don't really need to show anything related to showing a lot of the stuff. It's going to slow down your Revit. Okay, now I don't want to show that line. So what I would do is that I go VV, go to Topo. Okay, turn off the primary and the secondary. So all you're going to be seeing is this particular setup. All right, next thing you do is you click on this guy right here, graphic display option. You go to lighting. Okay, this is very important. You go to session, click on still. Okay, that's what you want. Right now what I have is that, okay, this place is placed on Surrey. Now if you want to change it, that's fine, but the first thing you do that if you want to change this and make it into Vancouver, Seattle, duplicate one of the settings and call this, let's say July 4th. Okay, July 4th, 2020, 10 a.m. Okay, let's assume that that's what I want. I'm going to change this to Vancouver. So here, this is where it's very important. You just go Vancouver. Unfortunately, it's using Bing as a search engine, which is suck. Unfortunately, but unfortunately, this is what we get, right? Autodesk has signed an agreement with Microsoft. Now, I always check this on if you are working on a region where there is a daylight saving time. I always check it on. If you want like a perfect, really perfect site, you can always duplicate this and choose whatever you want. But here internal, I just leave it as current because most of the time people just only do it for once. They don't have to do it all the time. So this is kind of like one time kind of a thing. So this is saved within the project. Okay, so you don't have to change this every time. So you just change it once. Here, this is where the date it becomes very important. So it's today's date. So here I'm just going to say July 4th. Okay. Now for this particular date, I always change it to the future because the problem is that if you put it now, later on it's going to get built in the future. The shadow study is going to be slightly different because the Earth rotates every few years or something like that. So just plan it for future. Let's say 2020. Let's say this building is going to be built in 2 years. And you're going to say 10 a.m. Now, this is very important. Okay, ground plane at level. Okay, by default, I always turn it off. Okay, the reason why I turn it off is because you're going to use the topo to do your calculation. If you have topo, it's fine. If you don't have topo, then I would use it. I'll show you the difference between the two. Okay, let's say assume that that's what I want. Okay. Now you're done. All you have to do is just turn that on, and that's your shadow study.
Hey,
now,
Simon.
Yes.
Oftentimes we rotate our model with respect to solar north. How do you make sure that you have solar north in the right direction?
Oh, I see. Okay, the question is like, where's the solar north? Now, this depends on where you want to rotate your true north, okay? Because this is very important. Now, this is in Surrey, so the north is basically up, okay? I don't have to change much. So if you want to do that, your project north, you have to make it into true north, okay? Yeah, true north, this is already the true north, so it's not a big problem. Because in Vancouver, when you're doing a building, it's like often it's 45 degree. Make sure you always change the rotation of your building based on true north. So if the survey gives you an actual saying that this is true north, make sure that you match the thing. And for your project north, you say the building is going to be this rotation. So most of the time, orientation becomes very important. Okay, so this is where I set it up, Charles. So I always set it up as true north so that the shadow is going to fall exactly where the true north is supposed to be. Now, going back to that issue previously about whether you want to put in ground plane, this is the reason behind why you want to turn it on and off. So let's assume that you're doing a tower that's like, let's say 500 feet above sea level. So let's assume that this is going to be 500 feet. You notice that this shadow gets cut off here, okay? The minute that I go in here and change this, let's say lighting, and I want my ground plane to be level 1, okay? Now what happened is that the shadow is going to project beyond your topography. So that's the difference. If you don't have a lot of topography, let's say assume that this is my topo, this is the only information I got from my surveyor, then yes, you would have to turn that on just to make sure that that tower is projecting beyond that. If you don't do that, it's it's going to cut off at that topo, and then it's like, that's not going to give me the more realistic kind of a look. So, yep, once you have this, you can just basically duplicate. So what I typically do is that in this particular case, I would do shadow study for different variations. Let's say this is 10. Now you can just duplicate it and say, okay, this is going to be 12 p.m. And all you have to do is just go 12 p.m. Duplicate this. Let's say this is 2 p.m. Okay. Once you have the setting, all you have to do is just duplicate it. And there we go. So you have like different variations, and then this is where you basically go in and duplicate and give you what's the time. At the end of the day, what you're gonna get is this sort of a setup right here. Shadow study. And the guys who's doing this building is going to keep building, and then the shadow study is going to automatically generate it. Okay? It's very quick and easy and pretty accurate. Okay? So if you guys are planning to do a lot of this modeling, like Revit and shadow studies and stuff like that, if you build it correctly inside Revit, you can get like this very perfect kind of scenario where you don't have to redo all this. Because I know in the past what people do in SketchUp is that they do a shadow study, they crop that region, they take Google Map, slap it on, I guess, Photoshop, right? Export this out again and then put it on a sheet. So imagine how many works that they have to get to do that, right? It's a lot of work, whereas this one, it's already automatically generated, right? So here I have like March, depending on what regions, what kind of time do they want, right? So I did one for the March, June, September, and December. Okay, those are basically the 4 season. All right, I'm pretty sure if you're working with different municipality, they want to see that your building is not impacting the other building. So that concludes this. Do you guys have any questions? I know I'll go pretty quick, right? So simple stuff that you guys could use for pretty much anything inside Revit. Seattle, you guys have any question?
My question. The only view then that you'd be able to see the shadows is in this overall plan, right? You wouldn't be able to see those same shadows in elevation?
You can see it, yes. You could still see it in elevation, but the thing is that for a lot of shadow study, it really depends on what you want to achieve, right? If the city say, I want the shadow study to make sure the fins are look correctly and stuff like that, you can still generate it, right? If they say they want certain look or to build that characteristic, then yes, you will go in there and then just crop in that region and just put in the real shadow, like for different days. So the question is that, can you do the shadow study? Absolutely. So what do you typically do is that, assuming that you have a facade, I'm just going to do like a quick elevation. Hopefully this is not off angle. Oh, this is off angle. I don't want that. Okay, let's assume that this shadow study, the city was asking if whether your shadow study is it's impeding. Okay, the first thing I would do is that I would just turn off the site, turn off all this annotation. Okay, let's assume that this is your thing. You can still do it. So let's say graphic, lighting, single. Let's assume that this is 10 a.m. And then all you have to do is just turn that on, and then you could do study based on that. Let's assume that this is your fin, and then how is that impacting, this area right here. So that's how I would do it. I mean, you could do it. You could say, okay, and then once you get this, and then you just duplicate that section again and say, this is 10 a.m., 12 a.m., 12 p.m., 2 p.m., and then 4 p.m. At least you get that kind of, shadow, how that, sway into your building. All right, Seattle, do you guys have any question before I cut off?
Oh, no, thank you. That was great.
Thank you.
All right. All right, that concludes our presentation for today.
All right. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Simon.
No problem.